we are going to be going through Pocket Developer and how Pocket Developer can help with some extending the campaign builder, doing more with campaign builder than what you're able to do with it out of the box. So I've created a handout for you. This is the bit.ly link, since this Google Doc link is kind of ugly. So I believe if you go to this link right here, you should get to this same document that I am showing you on my screen right here. And as I say, this is just, it's a bit of a cheat sheet that you can use to refer to after the training is over. It's just got some kind of handy things in there. So as I mentioned here in this document, what I'm going to do, we're going to be talking about dates today, and this scenario is this. So in this scenario, we're going to just assume that your product or service includes support for 6 months after the purchase. And that after that, the support agreement is going to expire. And so what you want to do is you want to, number one, record when does that expire. And two, make sure that you can give the customers the details of their support agreement up front. And then, of course, email them and do some other things as the expiration approaches to get them to renew that support agreement. Okay, so all of this is dealing with that expiration date, 6 months out from the date that your customer purchases. Okay, so if that's our scenario, we have 3 problems in Campaign Builder. Okay, the first one is, how do you put a date 6 months from purchase in a custom date field? In Campaign Builder, you can't do that right now. In fact, how do you put any date other than, obviously hand entering it? But how do you put a date in a custom date field? You cannot. And how do you put one 6 months out? Cannot. Number 2 problem is, assuming I've got a date in a date field already, then how do I also format that date in a way that it looks nice in all of my emails? We call that pretty date. Some other people call that humanizing the date. But if you just put, an ugly Infusionsoft date field in there, it's definitely going to look pretty bad, pretty unprofessional. And then number 3 problem is, okay, well, that, it could be workable if they only bought one product, because I'm going to use up a couple of fields in my contact record to, assuming I can do these things, I'm going to put them in the contact record, and I'm going to use maybe one field for the date itself, the date field, and one field for the text field for that pretty version that I can merge in. I might have a date time field as well. And, maybe using up 3 fields in your contact record is okay for some people, but for a lot of people, that's not okay, because those contact fields are at a premium. You're limited, in case you don't know, you're limited to 100 of those in Infusionsoft. So that's why they are so precious. But if you kind of extend it out and say, well, if they're only buying one product or service from you, that's fine. But what if you have a scenario where they buy 20, for example, 20 different products, all of which have like us. We're a perfect example. Okay. So here we have, I don't know, 30 some odd of these plugins, or I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a lot. And each one of them, when you buy them, does get upgrades and support for some period of time. And that period of time varies depending on whether you bought them a la carte or whether you bought them as part of one of these packages. So if someone bought each one of these kind of one at a time with different at different dates and times, how do I keep track of that and when the support expires for each one of those products? Okay, so that would, if I did that for each one, well, obviously that would become totally unworkable. I couldn't possibly store all of those dates in the contact field, or in the contact record rather. So the question is, how do you keep from using up all of your custom fields? So the solution for those that we use is we use our plugin called Any Date, Any Format, Anywhere. We're also going to use another two plugins in conjunction with it, but this, again, we're working with dates primarily today, so this is the one we're focusing on. And we're going to use that to add the term of the support agreement to the date of purchase. And you'll see that in just a minute in Campaign Builder. So in other words, in this scenario, we're going to have a purchase that's made. It's going to trigger a goal. That goal is going to take today's date plus 6 months, which is the term of our service agreement, put it in a custom field so that we can then merge it into our emails and other communications, right? We're also going to use Any Date, Anywhere to format that date to put it in a nice, human, pretty form and put that in a custom field. So that's going to solve number 1 and 2. But then we're going to look at sort of an advanced power user strategy in number 3. So what we're going to do there is I'm going to show you how we put those dates in an individual order so that each time if someone placed 20 orders, those dates would be going in the individual order that itself, and therefore not using up custom fields in the contact record. And then we are going to use those dates from the orders in rather than using a field timer in the custom in the Campaign Builder, we're going to use another plugin we have called Universal Delay Timer instead, because Universal Delay Timer will work with the order fields and not just contact fields. And we're also going to touch on very briefly our advanced merge field notation in order to do that. Now, I am going to cover advanced merge field notation in much more detail in a later session. So I don't want people to get really too hung up on this this merge field notation, but to show you this, I kind of had to throw it in there a little bit. And the idea there is that we temporarily move it from the order to the contact record when we need to send an email or a text. We send that email text, then we clear it out of the contact record. We call those stash fields, or stashing the data, or just-in-time data, as soon as it's no longer needed. So you can reuse those fields over and over again as necessary. So that is going to be our solution. So I'm going to come back to this cheat sheet as we go along. I want to move now to the Campaign Builder itself, and as soon as I can find that. Okay. So, well, that's an interesting contact name. Okay, so here is our campaign that we're going to use to do this. And I'll take you through this sort of one at a time, and then we'll actually demo part of it maybe. Come on. I have the hardest time in Chrome getting it to delete lines. I don't know why. Okay, so let's just let me go back here to Nessa dog. Okay, so Nessa, I always use, for those you guys that don't know me, I always use my dogs as my test contacts. So Nessa is one of my dogs, sleeping soundly behind me, and so Nessa has placed an order today, as you can see, 9/22 for us in the States. And she has paid $20 for a product, which is a licensing fee here. Okay, so this is a new order that just came in today for Nessa. Okay, so I didn't do it because I don't have it necessarily hooked up, but what we would do here, I'm actually triggering this with a tag just because it's faster and easier than putting in an order every time. what we would do here is normally we would have this trigger on some sort of purchase goal, whether it was a specific category or a specific product or any purchase. So in this case, I am going to use PoloSkill's license fee for this goal. There it goes, right? And then we can hook that up like that. We could do the same down here as well. Oh, well, we don't want to run those both at the same time, so that's probably a pretty bad idea. Okay, so I won't hook that one up, but you get the idea. Okay, so we have this fired by a purchase, okay, because our scenario is that on purchase we want to record their date plus 6 months, okay? So this is where we get into our Pocket Developer plugin. So what I have here in this sequence is, you can see what the sequence, it says set dates and then delay 30 seconds before sending the email. I'll talk about the reason for the delay here in a moment and how we do a 30-second delay, which you may also know is something that Campaign Builder can't do out of the box. Its minimum delay is 15 minutes. So we use a plugin for that too. So, but set dates, then delay 30 seconds. So let's look at the set dates. So here is the first time that we use any date. And so it looks like this. Okay. Now, some of our, make this bigger. Everyone can see that. Some of these are very simple. These can get fairly complex. And the reason they can get complex is because you can do a lot of things with them. I tried to kind of keep this down the middle. So the way that our plugins work is, you will recall, we install these on your server. Okay. Now, in this case, this URL is our server because that's what I'm hooked up to. But if you were doing this in your campaign, this would be, whatever your domain is. And, I don't know your full domain, Guardian Strata something or another, .au, .com, whatever. And then we, unless you've put it somewhere else, we typically install our Pocket Developer plugins in this path. So it's scripts, then Pocket Developer, then blocks. Then each one has its own folder. So this one is called AnyDate, and then there is typically a single file in there as well, and that is the file that you are going to call. So if you happen to, oh, am I connected? Probably not. Hang on one second. So if you were to look at this on an FTP client on your server, again, this being mine. Okay, so the okay, so the scripts is right here. Oh wait, I'm already in scripts. Sorry, here we go. So this is our lower level directory, then scripts, then Pocket Developer. Give it a second. I've got a lot happening here. There it goes. Then blocks. There we go. So this is all of them here, and you can see AnyDate is here, and then AnyDate.php. So that's what it looks like after it's been installed on your server. Now, I would also take a moment to point out to you all here that on our website, if you go to the Learning Center, and then here we have PDev, which is our shorthand for Pocket Developer, documentation. You will find a list of the basic kind of documentation for most of these. We are still working on the documentation for some of them. So here you will find any date, any format, anywhere. as well. And that will also, so you don't have to actually go into your FTP to figure this all out. You should be able to just look at our documentation and get the proper path and name for each one of these plugins that you are going to then use as the URL in your HTTP post snippet. But I did want to just kind of explain to you how that worked, because it works across the board for all of those plugins. Okay. Now, when you open a new HTTP post snippet, let me just go back, just because I'm not positive about where everybody is in terms of their familiarity with Campaign Builder. So when I'm in a sequence here, and I go to process, all the way at the almost to the end of process, there's this HTTP post snippet, and if I drag that out and then open it, you'll see that the default is that it opens with nothing in the URL, and it always has pre-fills the contact ID here and this merge field contact ID here, and then you just hit this plus or minus button to add more key value pairs. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this back. So that's a post, and so I've already got these filled in like this. So here, so we've got our contact ID, which is the contact ID which is running through the campaign. And what we're saying here is we've got a couple different parameters that are required, one of which is date, another of which is format, and the final one is save to. This adjustment is optional. You can leave it out if you want, but we're going to use it. Now, in this case, date is pretty easy. We're just going to say, right here, we can say today. And it knows that today is literally today. In the US, here it's Monday, September 22nd. 23rd for you guys over in Australia. Today means actually, if you look on your handout that I did for you, you'll note further down that today actually it resolves to today at midnight. Whereas if I, instead of today, if the time is important, if I said now here instead, that would actually resolve to Monday, September 22nd at 5:26 p.m. So either one, for if you're trying to get today's date or today's date and time, either today or now, will work here in this date field. Okay, so we're going to say either today or now is the date that we are working with, meaning it's the basis or the starting point for what we want to go in our field. Now, then we have to say, okay, well, so we have a date. Well, let me just talk more about date. Hang on 1 second. I got some more to say about that. So let's look here on your handout. It gives you some acceptable date and time values. So I talked about now, which is current date and time. It will also take today, which means it thinks midnight today. It will take a constant. So you could say, anything, something like this, just by typing in a text string representing a date in that parameter, and then it would work off of that. Now, you could do that. Of course, that's not very dynamic at all, but there are times when that's appropriate and where you need that. You can put any Infusionsoft merge field in there. So if you already have a field that has either a date field or a date time field, or that contains text, which is a valid text representation of a date, any of those could go here as well. So just as an example, right here, I could put, for example, anniversary or birthday because I happen to know that both of those are date fields, right? But so that's what I mean by a merge field. Could also go in there, okay? The other thing that can go in there, and I'm going to cover it later, is in these fields can have our advanced merge field notation, which gets you into other tables rather than just the contact record. But we'll get to that part later. But those are what are acceptable in any of these date or time parameters here. And then we have format. So you can see here that I've said this is an L, lowercase l, comma, capital F, lowercase j. So where that's coming from actually is this is all coming from basically PHP. As I said, this is kind of doing PHP behind the scenes. And so what I've given you on your handout is I've given you a cheat sheet of some of the most common date and time codes that you can use in that format parameter. So all of these refer to day, the day part of a date, the week, the month, the year. You can see all those. Remember I said that we used lowercase l before, which is full name of the day, Monday through Sunday. Then we had a comma, and then we had capital F, which you can see here is the full month, January through December, and then J. Now, I don't think J is on. I should put J on here. I actually don't list J here, but what J does, I do have it down here. What J does is it, ooh, I think I have this backwards. Oh, no, I don't. Sorry, I do have J here. Where's J? J is the day of the month, like 22nd. It's the S I don't have, which I'm going to get to later, so never mind that. So I do have it. So this is going to return right now, for us, Thursday, September 22nd, or sorry, Thursday, September 22 is what that's going to return. Thursday, September 22. Now, if I wanted it to return September 22nd, I would put an S on the end of that, and that's what I was looking at. And you're going, what? So I'll show you here. This is what to me, really, nope, capital S. Sorry. Capital S. So again, these are in your notes. Here are some common formats. These are the ones I use the most, and so I pretty much ignore all of this stuff, and I just go to my little list of these. So this format right here, okay, is one you will use all the time. And it is because this is Infusionsoft's date format. So anytime you are trying to put anytime this save to is a date field or a date time field, then this format here must be that Infusionsoft date time format, or it's not going to go in. Okay, if happens all the time, I see it in the forums all the time. Someone says everything's saved. I saved a bunch of things to the record, and everything's saved except for the date. And right away, you know that they have a date formatting problem. Okay, so this is the format, and you can see what it returns here is this for me anyway. To that, assuming that that the date is 9/22 and the time is 8 o'clock, that's AM, and that the server is using Eastern time zone, which Infusionsoft does, then this is what it will return. It has this funny T, \T, which is actually a space. But when you type in the format, it has to be just like that. You copy that and you paste it right in here for format when you're using a date time field. This is another one that This is American date, obviously, for us. So small m, small d, big Y gives you a 2-digit 09/22 2014 with dashes in between. This capital F, lowercase j, capital S, this is that S that I was talking about, is what appends the ST or the ND on the end of it. So it'll say first, second, third, fourth, fifth, etc. When you put this capital S on the end. Same here, right? This M gives you, instead of September, it gives you the 3-digit code, lowercase m, which you may also choose to use, and then also the pretty date, whatever that's called, I'm not sure. I personally use this format a lot as well, because I actually I use this in files and I use it in links. In fact, if you go all the way up here and you look at my bit.ly link, it has that format. So that allows me to merge this into links and create dynamic links that I can email out over and over again without having to reset those links. So I actually use that format and personally in a lot of places. So that's one of my most used formats. And then of course we also have time formats, which, you know, time is how much can you do with time, really. But so this one, lowercase g colon lowercase I, that's what gives you the 8 o'clock part. The capital A gives you AM PM. You don't switch this to A or P. Just the capital A will, depending on the time, will create AM or PM. And then this T here, uppercase T, will return the 3-letter value, 3 or 4-letter value of the time zone for the server that you're on, unless you somehow change that. So these are probably all the formats that you're going to think of that you need for this field. But if you can't, but you can obviously mix and match these codes in any way that you want in order to get the date that you want saved in a field. Okay. Either as a text or a date time field. Okay, so I mean, obviously you can't put September 22nd ND in a date field, right? That's got to go in a text field. Whereas something like this can go in it, definitely goes in a date time field. So that's kind of how that works. Okay, and then the next piece we have here on any date is we have what's called an adjustment. That adjustment, as I said earlier, is optional. You don't have to. In fact, you'll see it later on where I will use this without an adjustment. But because what we're doing is we're trying to store the date 6 months from the date of purchase, we use now, which is dynamic, or today would work too. That's what I had originally. And then we say plus 6 months. And it's going to put 6 months from today in this format, in this field. Now, I'm using job title, and I like job title mainly because it's on the front of a contact, if I can find one. So I don't have one up, but so you can see it easily when you're messing around and testing things. It'll be one of the first things to come up. Anyway, you get the idea. So I often will use that, especially when I'm doing demos, as one of my stash fields. It's a field that we typically don't use very often internally, so our contacts don't have anything in job title, so I'm not overwriting anything. So I just use that to stash things in. And I'll show you Nessa, her record here in a second where we've actually done this. So talking about this adjustment though, okay, let's cover this adjustment because this is really pretty clever stuff right here. So your adjustment, I've just given you some samples. Just made it very unhappy, didn't I? I've given you some samples of some things that you can put in there. For example, plus 1 day, plus 1 week, minus 2 weeks, you know, plus 1 week, 2 days, 4 hours and 2 seconds. Next Thursday, last Monday, third Thursday of the month. There are, now typically in Campaign Builder, you really aren't going to use these next and last and first, second, thirds, or last day of type values. We use them in PHP. It's possible there would be like advanced scenarios, but these can also get you in trouble too if you don't test them out thoroughly. But I wanted you to know that they're there and they're possible. Typically what we are going to be using are these plus and minus 1 days, right? So if I say, if today is 9/22/2014 at 8 a.m., and I say plus 1 day, then it's going to return 9/23 at 8 a.m. If I say plus 1 week, it returns 9/29 at 8 a.m. Minus 2 weeks was 9/8. And then, plus 1 week, 2 days, 4 hours and 2 seconds returns 10/1 at 8:38 p.m., which I didn't bother to calculate the seconds, but you kind of get the idea. It will. In fact, I believe it goes out to nanoseconds if you want it to. Not necessary. Now, there's just the one comment I will make on these. If you choose to use them, you should know that right now, you'll notice these return 8 o'clock because at the time I did it, I'm assuming the time was 8, and so it kept it that. However, when you use next, last, third, things like that for relative date stuff, then it will make this. It starts with, like when next Thursday, it assumes next Thursday at midnight. So unless you do something else to change the time, these are always going to return midnight, just so you know. Now, down here in your resources, I actually gave you the PHP documentation for these things. So if you want to dig into what, and only because you shouldn't pay any attention, unless some of you guys are programmers, or want to become programmers, you don't really care so much about the PHP itself. But what you care about is, for example, if you go to relative formats here, it does give you a bunch of these codes, like yesterday, midnight, today, now, noon, tomorrow, back of the hour, front of the hour, etc. Ago is another one. If I go to time or date formats, for example, here are those codes as well with some different examples of them and what they return. So again, not for you to dig into PHP, but this is based on PHP. It is using PHP in the background, and therefore I just gave you the PHP as reference there. But that said, this string to time function, this is the one that does the plus or minus days. So if you go here, you can see here are some examples of that. They didn't give you very many, so I thought actually the better reference was something I found. This is actually in the documentation, interestingly enough, of a WordPress plugin. But I was just searching to find some better lists for you, and oops, I don't think I copied that. And what was cool about this one was it gives you a little thing to test all the different formats. Right here, you can see this relative date tester. So you can see, it says, well, here's the current time. If you put in last day of -5 months, this is what you get. So you can enter any of these that I had here, and it will, like this one, and it will do it for you. It will tell you, number one, is it valid? And so you can also kind of test and make sure you're going to get, the result that you want. Come on, there it goes. 2nd of October 2014, 1:42. This is using UTC, Universal Time Code. But just if you want to get a feel for it, you can also do random. So see, it just changed to last day of +1 month is 31st of October 2014. Do another one. Noon. If I just put in noon, it says today, 12 p.m. Anyway, I thought this was pretty cool. You can learn third Friday of previous month was 15th of August 2014, things like that. So anyway, I put that in there for you to have as a reference. These are handy when you're trying to figure out how to get the adjustment in here that you want. So with that, let's go back to our campaign. So that was our first post. That was a lot of explanation, but it's probably the last time I will have to explain all that post stuff for you, at least for this one. So this was our post that puts the human version or pretty date in the text field called job title 6 months from today on purchase. Then, so we also, when we're going to work with dates, we also always need to put that date in a date field as well, a field of type date. And I'm going to assume you guys know how to add custom fields. If you don't, let me know. Oh, Asi, I was looking and I missed your question. When you enter a constant, what format do you use, American or European? Well, you know, that is an excellent question. I believe it will take both, and we can test that in a minute and confirm that. But basically, it's pretty flexible in terms of its ability to take text and parse it and like figure it out. So I'm pretty sure it'll take both, but we'll just double check that and just confirm that. What is your, so if you were just going to type a date, you know, European it's day 14, it's day, month, year, right? So how would you, what would that look like? Day, month, year. Okay. So yeah, so we'll test that in a second. Okay. So here, so I started to say that you need to also put this in a date field. And the reason is, at least in this first kind of basic level scenario, I'm going to want to run a field timer that says, you know, 3 weeks before the expiration of their agreement, I want to start sending them nag emails to get them to re-up. And the way to do that from within Campaign Builder stock is to use a field timer, and field timer takes a date field, not a date time field. It won't work on a date time field. It only works on a date field. So again, I am, rather than creating a custom field, because I'm way out of custom fields, I have just used anniversary, which is a stock date field rather. And you'll notice here, what am I doing? For format, I'm using Infusionsoft's format. And because I'm putting it in a date field. But again, I'm saying the same thing. Today plus 6 months in this format goes in the anniversary date. Okay. Then what I'm doing is I'm using our custom delay timer. And I do that because anytime you're doing posts, some things, let me go back. Some things you should know about posts are this. First of all, in theory, these things run in sequential order in theory, but in reality, they really don't. And that's because they happen so quickly that in effect, they run at the same time. So most of the time, if they're not dependent on one another, that really doesn't matter, right? But if I need one to build on the next, then I might, because the other thing is, I say they're fired simultaneously, but they don't necessarily run simultaneously. Sometimes one will hang, and every once in a while, you know, one, you know, will get out of order. So if you, for example, really need these to go in the proper sequence, then you need to put a delay between them. Well, if you've got bunches of these, a 15-minute delay is totally not workable. You don't need 15 minutes, which is the minimum delay timer in Infusionsoft. You need a few seconds, right, to let these go. The other scenario, for me, these aren't dependent on one another. I don't need to put a delay between them. I don't care about that. But I do put a delay at the end, because what I do want is I do want to give it a quick pause to allow these to finish putting these dates in the fields before I try to send an email out, which uses those fields as a merge field. Because if I don't, sometimes I can get a blank, which is kind of embarrassing. You know, it just hasn't had time to finish. And so when the email goes, which it will, right? Here's the other thing you guys should know about this. So these things don't wait to finish before they fire the next one. They just have to start them. Okay, so it's going to say start this one, start this one, start this one, not caring whether this one has actually completed or not. Okay. So that's why if this one takes a long time, and then you immediately get to where you send the email using this merge field job title and it hasn't finished yet, then you get a blank, right? And so that's why I put this little delay in there. So in this case, it's a 10-second delay. It uses one of our plugins, which is a free plugin that we have called Custom Delay Timer. This is its path, custom delay. customdelay.php. It only has, besides contact ID, it has two parameters, both of which are required. One is the call name. And what we recommend as a best practice is that you make up a completely unique call name each time you use one of these. If you connect them, I'll talk about that in a second, in the sequence, then you're not going to call it accidentally, because something from outside that sequence can't trigger a goal that's all connected up in the middle. However, just as a best practice, because sometimes you won't connect them, we like to make these unique, so you don't, it's like using a tag goal as a start and you don't realize that you've used that same tag goal in like 5 campaigns, and you apply that tag and all of a sudden bunches of things start triggering that you didn't expect. So it's just kind of best to make up unique names. I call these PD wake up, and then just like hit my keyboard and just make something random. And then how many seconds do you want to delay for is this second parameter here. So we're saying we're gonna after 10 seconds, we are going to fire this API goal. Okay, so you make a note of that one because you're going to need it. Okay, so we fill that in, we go back to our sequence. Notice that when I use a timer, a delay, one of our plugins that create delays, it always goes at the end of the sequence. If you have it in the middle of a sequence, it's going to give you some weird stuff. Okay, so it should be the last thing in a sequence, and then the next thing immediately following it will be a API goal. And some of you may not have ever used an API goal. If you actually, wrong one. That's not what I want. If you go here, I use other. I pull out other. Okay, and other starts as a tag goal. But if you click on that little tag to get the little meta things here, little icon dudes, and you scroll all the way to the bottom of this guy right here under integrations, there's one here at the bottom called API call is made. Okay, so that's an API goal, and it works literally. I mean, this thing is almost interchangeable with a tag goal. I think of them as being almost the same thing, except that rather than being applied by a tag, it is called by a HTTP post or script or something that specifically is trying to fire this little goal here. And so our script has 2 parameters, an API goal. One is your integration name, which is just your app. That's my app name up here. So you would put your app name here, and then the call name. So this is what it needs to know in order to get triggered. And I actually think I might have the wrong, yeah. Nope. Hang on. Did I? Yep. I did do that wrong. So this right here, which I copied and said we need to make a note of, has to match that because this is firing that. This is triggering that goal. Yeah, see, I called it this, and I must have copied something incorrectly. And so this one has to also be called that. Let's do this just so I can keep it all straight. Okay, so this one's going to wait 10 seconds, and then 10 seconds is going to trigger this, which is going to satisfy this goal and let it continue moving to the left. I don't know about you guys, but I would give anything for an X right here to get rid of this stupid thing. I hate it. Okay, so that's a custom delay timer. And then, all right, we've got what comes next is this. So this is this is kind of the basic way that you would set this up. So remember, we've written our date in the job title field, the pretty date in the job title field. So what I have now is I just have a basic email going out that says, thank you, because remember, this all is about to fire immediately after the purchase is made. So I just say here, thanks for purchasing a support agreement. It ends, and I put my job title field there. So it'll say September 22nd, whatever. Well, 6 months from now, whenever that is, right? So out goes my email using my date in my field, my custom field. And then I would use a field timer here, okay? And that field timer we can use because, in fact, we put the date, that expiration date, in the anniversary field. In this case, you would obviously put it in some sort of a custom field, probably not anniversary. And then we said, all right, wait until 3 weeks before the expiration of that contract, and then do the next thing, which would probably, be another one. Hey, your support agreement's about to expire. And then wait 2 weeks and fire that field timer again and say, hey, get cracking. You need to renew your, support agreement, etc. Okay. So these are running off of Infusionsoft field timers. Again, the problem with field timers, well, it says it right here, is that it must be a date field in the contact record. And that's a problem when you don't have, enough custom fields in the contact record, but we will address that problem later here in just a minute instead. But for now, assuming simple scenario where we do in fact have the room for it, and we aren't going to be doing a lot of these, we can just run this campaign, run this date sequence off of that. So in this scenario, which is basically the same idea, what happens is instead of writing that date to a contact field, we're going to write it to the order itself. Okay. So again, the first assumption that we've made here is that because this is being fired by the purchase goal, it means that purchase has just happened. So one of the assumptions we can make, at least early in this campaign, is that we're going to be dealing with the newest order, because it's unlikely that the same contact is going to slam in 3 orders within a few seconds of one another. Later on down the way here, we can't make that assumption, but to begin with, we will. So what we're going to do here, just so you can see the difference, and again, there is documentation on this in the Learning Center. It's one of the first ones. It's called Advanced Field Notation. So this, you'll see, this looks absolutely identical. Contact dot underscore and then the field name. We're saying to use the order table. Now, by the way, in Infusionsoft, just so you know, this is actually called the job table. we created an alias for that and called it order, because it's hard for people who don't use the API a lot to remember that the order table is really called job. So either one will work, job or order. So you can use either one. And then we say, I've got a custom field in the order table called demo custom text field. And since it's custom, we do put that underscore there. And then in our notation, one of many pieces of that notation is this .count. I mean, sorry, not .count, .newest. So this will, just like this will just say, find me the newest order for this contact and put that date in that field. Okay. And we can do that with just .newest. In fact, right now we could even leave this off because it actually defaults to newest. So in theory, we could even just leave that off for now. But I wanted to put it there to make you aware. Other values that work here are also first, last, and oldest. But so this is actually going to write to the order field, to the order itself, rather than to the and I can show you that real quick. I actually ran one on Nessa. So if you look at, I placed an order for Nessa already, and find Nessa, and I did run this part of the process. So if you go to orders, find Nessa's order here, open it. So here's her order. And you'll notice that we have custom fields on orders, just the same as we do on contacts. And I have this one here under Kim Demo, and I created these fields. So here is my pretty date, and here is my date field. Okay, I didn't write anything to this. So these are working exactly as they did in the contact record, except that now they are on an order instead of being on a contact. So that's what that does. And then, so save to order dot, and then your custom field name. Now we have basically the same thing happening over here. That's what created that date in that date field. And then we have that same custom delay timer, and for the same reason. Okay, so there we have the date field, okay, that's being written to. And then, now this is where we kind of start to go a little bit off script from the previous version, because there's our delay timer. Now, what happens now is, so imagine now that 3 months go by, and we want to now, or 6 months go by, and we want to start emailing them about their expiration. So what we have to do is, in order to send an email, because we don't control this interface, we can't merge a order information into an email. That will not work. We can do, actually, we're about to be able to, because we have a plugin that's fixing to come out that will do that. But for the moment, we cannot do that. So, so what we do is we call it stashing. So we temporarily go pull the information we need, and we write it into the contact record just long enough to do what we need with it, and then we get rid of it. So in this case, what I do, and I use middle name all the time for one of my text stash fields because I never put anything in middle name. So here what we're doing is we're saying we're using, now, so this is any date again, and we're saying today, we're saying date and time, and then we're saying again, this is our pretty date basically format, but with a year now. So we're saying, like, September, whatever it is, April 15th, 2015. is our format, and we're going to stick that in middle name just temporarily. Oh, sorry, wait a minute. I got ahead of myself. No, I was wondering why this didn't look right. Duh. Kim, hang on. I just told you guys totally wrong. Sorry, I am ahead of myself. I'm not, this is to send, here's what this is to actually send the original one. I haven't gotten 3 weeks out, or that's way over here. This is just to send that first email after they've bought. So I temporarily, because I put that in the order, I also have to put it in middle name, right? And then I send this first thing out. This happens right after they purchase. This is that same email that says, thanks for your purchase. Your deal expires. Your agreement ends on this date. Okay, and I stashed it in middle name here because where it's going to live for the next 6 months is in the order. But I had to stash it here temporarily just to get this email out, right? And then what I did is I cleared the middle name, and the way I clear it is by using another one of our plugins called AnyText. So AnyText works in many ways. It's sort of similar to AnyDate, except that because it's like its full name is AnyText, any format, anywhere. And it does something similar, but except it works with text strings rather than date. But one of the things it does is if you make text to save blank, it will actually wipe out this text field, so it'll make it blank again. So now when we're done, after this email went out, boom, we fixed our middle name back and made that blank. And then we put the campaign to sleep until 3 weeks before the expiration. Now, this is our universal delay timer. And this is what is going to eventually, I hope, solve your 17-hour differential. So this looks like, so this should be like fairly easy to do. I just have to work it out and make sure of it before I tell you. But so this is the one for now. This is the one plugin we have that never runs on your server. We don't install this one on your server. This one runs on ours. So when you buy it, it stores your app name with your, securely I might add, with your API key, similar to what Plus This and all the rest of them do. And you call this one off of our server, because basically what we've got going here is like this gargantuan cron job. And so what it does is it stores this information. It says, all right, for this contact ID, for this application on this date, okay, which is made up, and time, which is made up of these 3 parameters, date, time, and adjustment, fire this call. So what this is saying is, and again, this is able to use our advanced merge field notation. So it's saying the date comes from order, this date field in the order, and it's the newest one, because right now, again, this just fired after the order was placed, so I can still assume that it's just the newest order at 4 p.m. 3 weeks before this date. So 3 weeks before this date at 4 p.m., wake up this campaign is basically what it's doing. So it's going to sit there for 5 months and 1 week. And then on that date and time, it's going to fire that API call. And again, that's our universal delay timer. It always sits at the end. And you can see what comes next is that call. Okay. So when that fires, right, then the whole campaign wakes up and starts moving again. So then what it's going to do is, which one is this? Wait, oops, sorry, it's this one that it just fired, not that one. It wakes up and then starts moving again. Okay, so it's going to do the same thing that we just did, right? Only this time, instead of stashing it in the middle name from today's date, because now it's going to go, this is where I thought we were before. Now this is where the merge notation starts to get kind of interesting. And so I'll put this here so you can so you can see it. Again, don't get too hung up on the merge notation because we're going to do this in a good bit of detail, but I want you to know that it's, why won't you zoom? It just doesn't want to zoom. Sorry about that. Hang on. Why don't you want to zoom? That's weird. Normally it does. Anyway, hopefully you can see that. So what this says is, it says, I don't like that. There we go. That I know you can see. It says, or again, order field, that custom date field this time, and then it still says newest back here, but notice I've added a new parameter. And by the way, these things, we have loads of these, all kinds of crazy stuff you can do in this notation. But this one is just using filter by. And in the order table, it happens to have a product ID. And I happen to know that that product that we bought, if I go look at the products, which I don't have up, but anyway, that product, that Polo Skills license, has a product ID of 25. So if I say filter by product ID 25, that's the field name, and then newest, now what I'm saying is, and I will show you how I get that. If you pull this over here, okay, so this is the table documentation for Infusionsoft. Which again, I'm getting like way in too deep here because I should just wait and cover this when we get to advanced field notation. But here's the job table, here's the product ID field, and so I know what it is and I know what's in there because it's all documented somewhat at Infusionsoft. And so what I'm saying here is I'm saying, okay, find me the order, because remember, this is 6 months from now. They could have had tons of orders by now. So now I do have to filter. I say, find me the newest order with that product on it, and then pull whatever is in that custom date field and stick that in the middle name field with this format. Okay, so that I can now use that to send this nag email that reminds you that this is your support agreement is about to expire. And I did, in fact, oh man, I'm triggering some kind of something or another that I didn't mean to. You remember when I said you careful when you use those tags? Because something might fire that you weren't expecting. I've just done that. But anyway, so this is the email. Time to renew. You know, your support agreement ends, and then we merge in that middle name, which is going to be that date, right? Your support agreement, whatever you were going to put in there, and we start sending that nag sequence. We send it. Now we clear it, right? And then we run it again. That's the wrong one I'm in again. I keep going back to the wrong, sorry you guys, I keep going back to the wrong one. But then we put it to sleep again, right? With a that should say 2 weeks before expiration. I think I just have the title wrong. We'll see. Yep, so now it puts it to sleep till 2 weeks before that date, and then it's going to make that call and it's going to wake it up, and then it's going to do it again. So, you know, the down, well, you know, that's the etc. The downside of doing it this way, if they're, you know, the con is that because you have to stick every time you want to sleep, you can't chain these universal delay or custom delay timers together in a single sequence. So your campaigns are much longer in terms of just screen real estate, because you got to break them up into a lot more pieces in order to make these things happen. Where normally this would all be one sequence, then this would be like field timer, email, field timer, email. With us, you can't do that because these have to be at the end. But the upside, obviously, is massive because these, which really didn't have anything to do with the dates, but we now are able to number one, access and work off of all of the different order type or fields and tables, and gives us flexibility, that immense amounts of flexibility that was not there in the campaign builder to begin with. And when I keep harping about these custom fields, but I would say that if someone had one single complaint about campaign builder, that that they tallied the votes for what's the biggest complaint, I would say that those 100 custom fields are pretty darn high up that list. And the reason it is so high up the list is simply because you can't use the other ones, that the 500 that you're allowed in the other record types. So now you can, among many other things that you can do with this. But anyway, that gives you kind of a simple scenario, a real basic scenario that we could use to see how we can work with work dates and